grief is real because love is real. I heard that and I was like, that is so true. So, from that sense, you learn to accept it, you learn to live with it, you regulate your emotions better, but life is always with it.
Welcome to Women Thrive podcast. This is where you'll get to hear incredible stories of female entrepreneurs, business owners, women from all walks of life. Myself, Raymond Jan, and my co-host Abigail will be interviewing incredible women, hearing inspiring stories of women from all around the world. I have no doubt that you will find something that will be life-changing for you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join us for our future episodes.
Hello and welcome to today's podcast episode with Women Thrive. I'm excited to have you here for today's conversation. In today's podcast, we're talking about a love story, but it's actually not a Cinderella story. And we're talking about what happens when a love story turns into grief. My guest today is Bethel Stevens. Hi, Bethel.
Hi, Ramonda.
Good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Where are you joining us from?
I am in Washington, D.C.
Amazing. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you today. Now, I love to introduce my guest today to you. So, Bethel Stevens is an author of a brand new published book, Not a Cinderella Story, a powerful story of love, loss, and perseverance when life goes off script. She's also a speaker and mental health advocate who shares her personal journey through loss and grief as a young widow. She aims to inspire others, reimagine their dreams, and live life with hope and purpose. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
We have had the privilege of witnessing you going through the journey of writing your story. It's been probably almost more than a year long journey for you to really write your story as we've been behind the scenes supporting you with this. Tell me a little bit more about the book journey that you've been on.
Like you said, it's been a long time in process. It has been both healing, but also extremely emotional writing this book. It's a very personal story of my journey of both love and also loss, becoming a young widow. And I really wanted to peel back the curtain and share the things that you don't hear or people never warn you about, tell you about when you're experiencing grief for the first time. So I'm excited to have finally finished the project, and I really think it's going to be helpful to a lot of people. So I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. And as you said, it's not something that most people talk about. And when I read your book, it was quite clear that journey through grief is very, very personal and a lot of times lonely. And I know that's what you've gone through, but your courage to be able to script and really go into the depths of what that experience was like, it gives an insight of what it's like to be going through something so personal and deep.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Part of suffering isn't just the hard thing you're going through, it's feeling that you're all alone in it. And I think because grief it's uncomfortable, it's hard, it's difficult to talk about, we tend to suffer in silence. And even me, when it first happened and I was in that deep, dark place and the call stopped, right? People kind of just go back to their lives. And I was just sitting there alone, feeling invisible. This book is meant to reach out to that person and say, hey, you're not alone in this. And even though nobody else talks about the really hard days, the struggles, because we all want to get to the happy ending. And we will get to a place of resolution or perspective or hope. But the part in the middle, the process, is really, I think, what could help people. Because if we're vulnerable enough to say, actually, I didn't just hop on over from A to B, here's that black box nobody talks about. And the messy part, the raw part, I think it can really help people kind of make sense of it in their minds and their emotions and get to that place quicker.
As I say, it is lonely and it's hard to process. And when I was reading your story, there were parts of it that I didn't realize that goes on. As you say, when the calls stopped, when people moved on and gone back to their daily lives, you were still in it and processing and were left to pick up the pieces. And I know you shared this right actually from the beginning that being a young widow doesn't actually help. And when people assume that, oh, it's easier for you to deal with because you're still young.
Somebody actually said that to me. Oh, how old are you? I was 33 at the time. And they're like, oh, you're young. You'll be okay. And I can't tell you, Ramonda, I felt so invalidated in that moment. And for a long time, I thought, is there something wrong with me? Am I just not strong enough? Like what is it that I'm missing here? But in the course of writing this book, I dug into some of the research, and I think this can also be helpful just to raise awareness, right? And research says that, first of all, the average age of a widow is 59. Young widows, and those are defined as men or women between 25 and 39, actually have a harder time sort of reacclimating because one, it's something that they're not prepared for. It's an out of sequence event, right? So that throws them off. It's something they're not prepared for. And the second thing is there's no peer group, right? You're in that space primarily by yourself and your peers can't relate to you. This is very isolating from that perspective because you don't have that support group. So it does tend to be harder. And I think it's important to acknowledge this and be more gentle and be more empathetic with young widows.
So I delve in just a little bit into the story just to give our audience perspective. And interestingly, your title gives a little bit of the story away, which says, Not a Cinderella Story. So take me back a little bit when you met David, which was your husband, and just into a little bit of your love story and how it all unfolded.
I truly was swept off my feet by this man. So when I met David, I was at the time 25 years old. He had just turned 30, and it was as if everything aligned. And not to be cliche, but because I used to get annoyed when people say this, when you know, but I had that moment and I thought, oh my gosh, that is real. When you know, right? Where it's so difficult to describe because it's something you have to experience. But just off the bat, I felt, wow, I know that I know that I know that this is my person, my soulmate. Everything made sense. Things got easier. And he just was the most amazing, most beautiful, most kind, generous human being I'd ever met. So that I truly did feel like Cinderella and I was in a fairy tale.
I'm feeling really emotional because when I read your story and just how amazing he was, how supportive, just really he changed your life. And that's where you really thought that you're going into your wedlock and it's going to be the best love story for you. And I know it's not an easy thing to share and talk about, but you were excited about building your life together.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a very emotional person, so I don't mind my tears, but that's the way it was supposed to go. You wait for your whole life to meet this person, your person, you meet them. We got married, and I thought this is the beginning of happily ever after. This is the beginning, and you plan your whole life together. And that's really what I thought was going to happen.
But life had other plans, and when we busy planning our lives, God has other plans in store for us. And reason to be unknown, while why his life ended too soon. And you share very personally and deeply about his health challenges and struggles and just really what happened. Certainly don't want to spoil the story for our listeners today, but you were faced with the reality of life. Tell me a little bit more, as much as you're able or comfortable sharing.
Yeah. So it happened very quickly after our wedding. Things kind of just went downhill in terms of sickness. And I talk about exactly what was happening, but it was a very difficult number of years of dealing with sickness, and it just wakes you up, right? You just have to deal with it. And I had no doubt that, hey, it didn't matter what came at us. This was my person, and we were gonna try to figure it out. And so it hadn't occurred to me, even though I was faced with it, that I was going to lose him. I thought we were just going to keep fighting, 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 and life was going to be hard, but I was still going to have David. I mean, we just met, we just got married, we had our whole life ahead of us, and unfortunately, that's not what happened.
Yeah, and that's why the title of the story, not a Cinderella story, that there is no happy ending in this love story. And you share a lot about your journey of grief thereafter, which, as we spoke about, has been challenging and lonely.
Mhm.
What were the moments that you can recall from your journey after that really stood out for you that you would want to share with our audience today?
I think one, grief is not how you imagined it. I think it's one of those things where you think you know, but when you're in it, when you're experiencing it, then you're like, ah, that's what it is. This is a whole new type of emotion and everything that comes with it that I would never have thought was like this before I went through it, right? Similarly, if I saw somebody break a bone, I'd be like, ouch, that hurts. But if that happened to me, it's gonna hurt a lot more, right? So first and foremost, it's not what I thought. Therefore, going through it, I think it was difficult, and it also made me more empathetic because one, I've been uncomfortable around grief too. Being in it changes you. So that's one thing that I didn't realize before. The second thing was I thought I had to be, quote, over it, or I had to be somehow fixed before I could live life again. But then I came to that understanding that grief doesn't go away. You just get better at carrying it. So you actually live in a world of dual reality where your grief and your joys can coexist. And it has to. It has to, because I think that's the way to heal. Otherwise, you're either ignoring the thing you don't want to feel or you're just dwelling in it. But getting to a place when both of them can coexist means you can honor the love of the person because it just means that you did love them and that you miss them, but then you can also be grounded in the present because there's still a reason why you're here, and there's still a purpose, and there's still meaning, and life still needs to be lived.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something really powerful that joy and grief can coexist and it doesn't go away. You just become better at carrying it. And it must have been quite big weight on your shoulders to carry this weight. Do you feel like it lifts? It becomes easier as time goes on?
It only becomes easier because your capacity to carry it is expanding, meaning the moments still come. I'm 3 years out. I still get triggers, but I know that I can let that moment, I can feel the emotions and I let it pass. And I can still go out about my day, be productive, and do the things that I need to do. So it becomes easier in that I have more strength, more capacity, and my brain knows, hey, you're feeling this, but it's okay. This will pass. As opposed to before, what is this feeling? I can't do anything else today because it's too
Mm.
much for me to bear.
Yeah.
So I think one, especially with a close loss, a spouse, a child, even parents, right? Nobody's going to say, are you over them? No, you're going to miss them for the rest of your life. And because that's the case, that grief is going to be there for the rest of your life. And that's okay, right? That's okay. Grief is real because love is real. I heard that and I was like, that is so true. So, from that sense, you learn to accept it, you learn to live with it, you regulate your emotions better, but life is always with it. It continues with it.
Yeah. The third part of your book, you shared about your friend being there by your side. One of the wisdoms that she shared with you, that grief will be like a cloud that comes over and
Yep.
passes.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit more about your friend that played a part in your healing journey.
Yes, and there were a few. That particular friend had been through their own traumatic events as a child and growing up. So they share that wisdom with me that I still carry, which is like you just said, it's like a cloud. It doesn't stay, but every once in a while it comes around, right? So when you have that knowledge, you can be hopeful. You can remind yourself, I feel it now. It's okay to feel it now. And then I'm going to feel better afterward. This isn't a permanent state. I also had wrote about another friend who showed up. Sometimes that's just all you need, right? Just show up. I don't really need you to say anything because there's nothing you can say. And we often get uncomfortable. I used to be like this before, where I don't know what to say. Therefore, I'm gonna avoid this person or whatever the case may be. But this friend, she showed up at my house and said, I didn't know if you were gonna kick me out. I just thought I should be there. I thought maybe I could just make a meal or two for you or walk your dog. And that's it. And we don't have to talk about anything. But if you want to talk, I'm here to listen. And so just sitting with me in that space, not trying to fix anything, but just being there was so powerful and something I didn't even know I needed, right? But I think that's a way that we can show up that we don't think because oh, I don't know how to fix it, I don't have the solution, therefore it's going to be awkward or uncomfortable when it could
Mm.
be so much simpler than that.
That's amazing. That's so powerful. So there's a power in the pause and there's a power in the presence as well. There was something that wasn't helpful that you shared in the book, and that probably come from your most loved ones who care the most. And their advice was to stop crying,
Yeah.
which you didn't take to very well.
No, no. And that's the thing, right? When we see somebody we love in pain and crying, and you're just like, please stop, it's gonna be okay. Or, don't cry, don't cry. And I felt suffocated with that. And it was the people closest to me, my parents, my family members, because I couldn't stop crying. And I would try to refrain from it in their presence, but eventually I said, listen, I'm gonna need some space. And that was the best thing I could have done for me. And I talk about, there's research on this. Crying is actually beneficial. It releases chemicals that make you feel better. And that release is so necessary because we can hold grief in our bodies, right? And I think grieving openly, crying for as long as I needed to cry until I naturally stopped crying and then can do something else was what I needed. And it took some time, but eventually, right, when you let that out, you keep letting it out. I think that's absolutely part of the healing journey.
Yeah, it's powerful. And as you said, sometimes The closest people to us, they want the best, but they don't necessarily know how to help us. And
Yeah.
we might not even know or have the capacity to direct them that this is what you need. And a lot of times the wrong emotions come into play, like being resentful, being angry, especially when you're dealing with grief. So it's a sensitive place to thread. And I think that's why it's important to have these conversations, or even for someone who might not be going through grief themselves, but may know someone or may have someone in their family or friends who might be going through. And I think this conversation would be really, really helpful for them to understand, how do you support someone you care about who might be going through loss?
Mm. Be there. I think it's as simple as that. And people can grieve differently and do grieve differently and may want different things from their friends, their family members, but I cannot stress the importance of just being there in that discomfort, in that heaviness. And I completely recognize that that's going to take a lot out of somebody, and you may not be able to do that for everybody, but the person that you love, that you actually do want to support, make that space to sit in that heaviness with them. And sometimes it's not to fix it, but just to come alongside them, because I guarantee you that person is feeling so alone and isolated in that experience, and they will be so thankful for that.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a powerful reminder to all of us, to everyone, not only how to deal with grief themselves and what to expect, but also for those around us. What's the purpose of your book?
As I mentioned, it's a lonely place to be, especially as a young widow. It's not something that happens too frequently, and thank God for that. But I think that a lot of people going through something where they're in the category of like, oh, I can't imagine, right? They're feeling alone, they're feeling isolated. And sometimes you're thinking, am I going mad? Am I the only one experiencing this level of struggle, trauma, whatever the case may be? So the book one is saying, hey, you're not alone. And I'm going to be completely vulnerable and candid enough to share my struggle of just how bad it got. But I didn't want to just stop there. Once I take you through the journey of the lowest of lows, and then how I processed it, and then how I got to the place where I got a perspective of finding meaning and purpose and hope again, then that is a much more powerful way than just saying, you'll be okay, because eventually it's all going to work out. The big question is the how. That's the
Mm.
part that people don't like to share because we want to put sanitized, happy, I'm winning sort of things up on social media without showing the really hard parts and the process. So that's what I wanted to do. I think I had the person in mind who was where I was when I first became a widow, because I was looking for somebody to tell me honestly about what to expect. The second thing, as I mentioned, I incorporate some of the research, and my hope is that even if somebody is not going through a personal grief journey at the moment, but they want to understand. They want to be there for somebody else who's going through something. There's such a thing as cognitive empathy, which is different from emotional empathy, meaning you may not feel everything I'm feeling, but I can explain it to you in a way and with research and objectively so that you can try to understand. And I think the more we can understand each other, the more we can be empathetic, the more we can be helpful and show up for the people that we love. So those are the two main reasons I would say.
Yeah, amazing. As I say, you didn't find enough support or just real life examples how to navigate this part, which, as we spoke about, can be really, really lonely. And I'm glad that you've taken the time to write your story. It's a beautiful story. I read it a few times, and the story of your relationship and your whole experience, which was worth living, even I think for the pain that you had to endure. What was the wisdom that you developed as a result of this experience in your life?
Perhaps all is not lost, meaning getting to a point where everything as you know it changes, meaning you get to a point of complete devastation where your life as you imagined it, your future as you planned it, completely evaporates. There is still an opportunity to reimagine what life can look like. And to me, I love that word reimagine because a lot of times I felt the pressure to be strong and withstand, right? Be resilient, just stand there and take it and then try to get back to where you were. What if you can't? What if instead of bending, it crashes completely? And I like the visual of a shattered vase. You can't put it back together, but you can use the pieces to build something completely new. And that can still be beautiful in its own way. So I guess the big takeaway is my life as I imagined it is different now, but there is still potential for it to be beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful wisdom to share because our hopes, our dreams can get shattered. And a lot of times, the way we imagine that future doesn't go in the way that we thought it would. And it doesn't necessarily have to be due to loss. I think a lot of people could relate, whether it's a breakup of a relationship or change of circumstances. Life has a way of throwing curveballs at each and every one of us. And being able to navigate and see from a different perspective that your life might not be what you thought it might be as the end, but it's not the end as long as you keep going. And I know, Bethel, you've shared in your book that it was hard to reimagine what your life would be like. You didn't have the answers when you experienced your loss. However, now with the release of this book, you starting to build new plans and hopes for the future. Would you share with our audience what those are?
Yeah, I mean, who'd have thought I would have written a book, right?
Mm.
So I think this is absolutely part of that reimagining. So I'm excited about this new journey in life, to have this book out and to start speaking about it. My heart really is to inspire and encourage others because, as I mentioned, and I'm going to say it again, it's okay to talk about this openly because we need it. We need it for healing, and these conversations are important to have. So my goal going forward is to be able to create those spaces and be in those spaces to talk openly about this and be an agent of hope to allow people to process and to help people become aware, right? And I think that's going to help a lot of people.
How can people find you, connect with you, or be in your space?
Reimaginedjourneys.com. That's my website. You can also get a copy of the book there. Also, on the website, you can get links to the other social media spaces, but I am on Instagram as Bethel_Stevens. So I would love to get in touch with you, and I would love for you to get a copy of the book. And I really hope and pray that it will encourage you.
Amazing. And I want to invite our audience right now, if you feel inspired, if this conversation sparked something in you, is to take that moment to get in touch with Bethel, drop her a message. I can assure you that writing a book is not an easy thing. And also sharing such personal story with the world is very, very daunting. So I invite you to take a moment to grab the copy of the book. I really enjoyed it. It's a beautifully written book. We have the privilege of being the support behind the scenes in publishing this book, which I feel so honored that you've entrusted us to be part of this journey and support Bethel. share this episode, share the book with somebody else. This might be a difficult conversation to have or to start, but it could be a really beautiful one and really heartfelt. You don't know what people are going through and the challenges they're facing. So I think if you could share this story with anyone in your life, share it. They might just find hope and inspiration in this. And with that, I just want to say thank you for doing this. Thank you for choosing Women Thrive to be your partner in supporting your book launch.
Thank you. I absolutely enjoyed working with you on this project, and I cannot wait for others to get their hands on it.
Yeah. Well, let's get it out into the world. Let's touch and support more people going through it. I'm looking forward to actually seeing some of your book launch events. I know you're going to be doing more amazing things. So I encourage people to connect with you, see maybe you will be doing some things in person, maybe book readings, book signings, virtual gatherings. I know you're potentially looking to do a podcast as well, having more conversations about this subject. So should people be looking out for it anytime soon?
Absolutely. Everything will be on the website, reimaginejourneys.com. I'm going to do a multi-city book tour. There'll be online events as well. So I would love to see you at or on one of those.
Amazing. So make sure you go check out all the information in the show notes, Bethel Stevens, reimaginejourneys.com. And the book, one more time, is Another Cinderella Story. And you can find it on most publishing platforms where you can find books such as Amazon and Kindle, etc. So go ahead and grab yourself a copy and share it with somebody. Thank you so much, Bethel. We look forward to seeing you in person in one of your book launch events.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of our listeners, and make sure you share this episode with somebody that you feel this would resonate with. And thanks so much for staying with us. We look forward to seeing you on another episode. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Women Thrive podcast. If you found today's episode empowering and inspiring, be sure to subscribe and follow us. Better yet, leave a review and share it with others. We're committed to bringing you more stories that will empower and inspire you on your own journey. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep pursuing your dreams.